I came to America because I heard the streets were paved with gold. When I got here, I found out three things. First, the streets weren't paved with gold. Second, they weren't paved at all. And third, I was expected to pave them.
Lasting from the late 1800s to early 1900s, the Gilded Age was a time period characterized by booming industrialization and growth of major cities such as Boston, New York, and Chicago. With job opportunities on the rise, America found itself embracing more than just American culture. There were two major waves of immigration in the U.S. during this time, the Old Wave and the New Wave. Starting in the 1820s, the Old Wave was a flood of Western Europeans, including German, English, and Scandinavian immigrants. For the most part, immigrants came to the U.S. in hopes of taking advantage of the abundant job opportunities. They considered America as the land of opportunity and generally found work easily as unskilled laborers and industrial workers. Women were also accepted into the workforce as factory workers and domestic servants. The Germans mainly settled in New York City as well as the Midwest cities such as Cincinnati and St. Louis. They were also seeking job opportunities and furthered their careers as mechanics, carpenters, farmers, entrepreneurs, skilled artisans, and brewers.
Gradually transitioning into a new stage, the new wave of immigration beginning in the mid-1800s was characterized by the arrival of Southern Europeans, Eastern Europeans, and Asians. The Irish, who came to escape the brutality of the potato famine, were also considered part of the new wave. Many new wave immigrants, specifically the Jews and Catholics, came to the U.S. escaping religious persecution. In contrast to the old wave, the new immigrants were typically less educated, had less money, and were unskilled workers. 25% of them were birds of passage and had planned on making a sum of money and then returning back to their home country. Concepts like democracy were foreign to them, and they struggled to assimilate to American ways while still maintaining their native culture.
With the influx of immigrants, the U.S. was forced to accommodate to their diversity. One method was known as the melting pot theory, the idea that the single American culture would dominate the U.S. The immigrants were encouraged to assimilate and melt into American ways of life despite their origins. The old immigrants were successfully blended in and came to share political and social views. However, the new did not. Another theory was the salad bowl, or multiculturalism, which was the idea that cultural diversity would enrich America's mainstream ways of life. Immigrants were encouraged to express themselves and embrace their origins. America, as a metaphorical salad bowl, can be seen clearly in present day. Places like Little Italy and Chinatown came from the clustering of certain nationalities in major cities. In addition, there was also the theory of process, as mentioned earlier, which represents the progression and incorporation of immigrants into the ways of American lifestyle through contact and accommodation.
In arriving to the U.S., most Europeans were admitted through Ellis Island in New York, while the Asian immigrants came through Angel Island and San Francisco Bay, where processing could take anywhere from weeks to months. The trip to America was brutal, with inhumane conditions resulting in many illnesses and deaths. The conditions they arrived to were hardly better. America had a golden reputation, but the reality was much less glamorous. As the settlers continued to arrive, the demand for cheap housing increased. These were the perfect conditions for the spread of bacteria and diseases through water and sewage. This resulted in most large cities contracting infectious illnesses. Apart from the squalid conditions in which they lived, the immigrants were faced with much opposition and discrimination.
This political cartoon shows how many old wave immigrants tried to discriminate against the new wave while keeping their own migrant past in the shadows. Active in the 1840s and 50s, the Know Nothing Party, also known as the American Party, was based on the principles of nativism. They feared that the immigrants would steal American jobs because of their willingness to work low wages. Additionally, they blamed the Irish, who were usually heavy drinkers, for the corruption occurring in the U.S. Their anti-Catholic position also boosted their opposition against the Irish. In an effort to make it harder for immigrants to become citizens, they pushed for a 25-year citizenship requirement. Though the Know Nothing Party died out in the late 1850s, their nativist ideas resurfaced later with fresh fervor. Parties similar to the Know Nothing Party and restrictive laws were established to combat immigration. The Immigration Restriction League, for example, was founded in 1894 and lobbied for national legislation to limit the number of immigrants. They proclaimed the Anglo-Saxon American race to be pure and feared that it would disappear completely or be mixed with the inferior Eastern Europeans and Asians. They also associated the new immigrants with socialism and communism and were worried they would spread these dangerous concepts to America.
The Asians were most subjected to discrimination because of their strikingly different appearance and their tendency to immigrate as individuals. The Chinese came to the U.S. because of poverty and upheaval in South China, as well as encouragement coming from the Burlingame Treaty, which established friendly relations between the U.S. and China. Discrimination, specifically against the Chinese, intensified over the next decade and led to the development of the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, which barred Chinese laborers from entering the U.S. One excerpt from the act reads, "Hereafter no state court or court of the United States shall admit Chinese to citizenship, and all laws in conflict with this act are hereby repealed." Incoming Chinese immigrants were now considered illegal, and Angel Island became a detention and holding facility for them as they arrived. The Chinese retaliated through the Supreme Court. In the case United States versus Wong Kim Ark, the Supreme Court ruled that American-born children of Chinese immigrants were entitled to citizenship under the 14th Amendment, ultimately establishing the fact that all people born in the U.S. could be citizens, while incoming Chinese immigrants could not even apply for citizenship. In 1909, after the Japanese and Koreans started to arrive, they were barred from citizenship as well.
Between the grueling conditions and hardcore nativism the immigrants are faced with, America's Gilded Age, which seemed golden on the outside, was actually rotten to the core.